Recently, a furry YouTuber announced he was trying to build a collection of old fandom artifacts to preserve the history of furry and hopefully eventually have a travelling museum to exhibit at conventions. Now, whatever you think of Odin Wolf, I think this is actually quite admirable and a worthwhile contribution to our community. When I brought this up in a Telegram chat, though, someone said, definitely scrap old Mercits. And that may have been in jest, but they later questioned whether we should preserve old adult art, as they thought it reflected badly on our image. And I actually strongly disagree with this. We're right back to a thing I talked about in my last soapbox, where some people in the fandom insist that legitimacy and respectability can somehow magically be obtained by simply discarding the sexual aspects of the fandom. This is wrong on two fronts. Firstly, the sexual aspects of the fandom aren't some trivial sideshow that can be easily discarded. Furry may not be a fetish, but it is unrepentantly horny. Secondly, nobody is ever going to grant us legitimacy or respectability just because we pander to their banal sensibilities, so why should we make any sacrifices to do so? We enjoy the liberation that comes with being open about the things that other people have been programmed to be weirdly awkward and bottled about, and I don't think any of us care to give that up. And if we refuse to sanitize ourselves in the present, why should we whitewash our past? You can't really tell the story of the furry community without the story of its sexual side. Don't believe me? Okay. Explain to me what myrrh and awoe mean. What kind of reputation do foxes have? Why is not a funny word? How much of our unique cultural expression do you have to rip out before it's free from sexual connotations? So it is with our past. A mercit, therefore, is equally as deserving of preservation as any fursuit because it tells a story about who furries were before it became a museum piece. It tells a story about our relationship with our fandom and each other. A piece of pornographic art is as deserving of preservation as a piece of non-pornographic art. They both tell us something about our fandom. If you were to purposely choose to ignore one but not the other, then you would be writing that whole aspect of our culture and history out of your narrative. And that is what you are constructing when you choose to show or tell our history. A narrative. You have a choice and a responsibility. Do you tell the whole truth, even if some aspects are uncomfortable to some? Or do you pick and choose which bits of history are valid and safe, altering the narrative to suit an agenda? What is allowed in that narrative? Are petsuits okay, but mersuits are not? What about latex or harnesses? Are those little tiny dildo keychains okay, but not a bad dragon? The UK has some interesting rules about what porn is okay to publish and what isn't, and you might be surprised at what does and does not make the list. Reading it can seem like it's based on a narrow squick factor or kink shaming rather than any real moral evaluation of a given practice. This serves to illustrate how problematic gatekeeping what is and is not acceptable can be. Perhaps an even bigger question, though, is who is allowed in that narrative? It's no secret the hate levelled against furry tends to be barely disguised homophobia, and many of the attempts to clean up the fandom have had a certain heteronormative flavour. As much as we would like to deny it, racism, misogyny, and transphobia also exist within our fandom. Are we all allowed to be part of the narrative? Speaking of those ugly attitudes, though, there are some corollaries to this argument that are less pleasant. The burn furs are a part of our history, as are the raiders. Unfortunately, they also are something we should preserve knowledge of, but here we run into context as an important part of preservation. We rejected those groups and artifacts of their part in our history should not be separated from that context. Indeed, context is important to any artifact we preserve. It would be far too easy to swing the other way and simply present a mersuit as being a typical object without going into the evolution of social attitudes within the fandom around them. What do you display with or on a mersuit? I think it's somewhat less of a thing today, but shorts on a fursuit used to be something of a telltale, whereas today underwear on mersuits tend to be somewhat skimpier. The same goes for any piece, really. It's never enough to simply preserve the item if the context around it is lost or distorted. Now, I feel if you've been listening to this, you might interpret this as concern about the project, but that's not true. I actually think Odin Wolf has a fair bit of his own context in some of these issues, and I wish him luck. It was actually someone else's knee-jerk reaction that spurred me to write this, and I thought it was important to put this out there for anyone who might be tempted to feel the same. I don't think it's Odin's intention to collect old fursuits. They're not exactly the easiest thing to store, and they're usually quite valuable both in money and sentiment, but I expected eventually his collection might seek to include some. You should definitely go and check out his project. I'll see if I can dig up some links for the description below. That is the end of this video essay though. Do like it if it gave you food for thought. Leave a comment if you want to discuss it further. Watch some other videos, maybe subscribe and hit the bell. Send me a coffee if you really liked it.